Hello, listeners. Welcome to yet another episode of Courage Talks. The special guest today is Sonal Bahl. Sonal has spent more than 2 decades as a HR strategist and a career counselor. She has a unique experience of having worked across 5 countries. I'll let her dip in more into the details. Pleasure having you on board, Sonal.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for saying my name correctly. It is such a pleasure.
I,
It's
I could
usually
I could have
butchered.
stories on that myself.
No, but it's even like in India, it's happened. So Indian to Indian, I'm so grateful to be here in all
Awesome.
more ways than one.
I know. So, how do you describe your career trajectory so far? Why don't you just narrate us and take us through what's been your career journey so far?
Career trajectory has been wild, in one word. Did not plan and did not expect it to go this way. I don't know how deep you want to go, but started out in India, right? Started out in India at the age of 21 and spent 4 years in corporate. One of my first jobs actually is not mentioned on LinkedIn because it was too short a period of time. And that was with a tiny little startup back in the day called Naukri.com. And I was selling ad space
That
as
was
a
really
door.
fun.
It was really tiny back in the day. I'm talking about the year 2000.
Yeah.
And they were like less than a couple of years old. And there was a tiny little office in East Delhi. I used to take the bus and go there. And I used to sell ad space. And it just, yeah, a couple of months. I didn't last. I was really good at sales though, but yeah, it wasn't particularly fun. And I moved to GE Capital, which back in the day, Hetal, you probably remember, was considered one of the world's, most admired companies, world's most respected companies by Fortune, by Forbes. Of course, it's a totally different
Yeah.
story today.
Yeah.
And I was in human resources. So even in between and all these other companies, I've always been in like HR, recruiting, human resources. That I have to say, that was by design. I kind of knew when I was in the 12th that what is this HR business? What is this personnel management? Like that sounds fun. And I want to do it. I want to do that. And then fate took me to South America. So this is like Jan 2005. So at the time of recording this podcast,
Faith is name of an airline.
Fate is name of an airline. Not quite. Just a twist in life, right? And I lived in Uruguay for a year and then Chile for 2 years. And this is right after like leaving GE Capital and going through all of these shifts. And over there, I was working in PwC. I was in PricewaterhouseCoopers, doing, consulting, going through the consulting ranks, consultant, senior consultant, traveling, doing all the things that honestly one would love before the family expands, when you have all of that freedom. And there was an itch. I always kind of knew that I wanted to study further. I just knew I wanted to study further, but I was also a bit of a chicken because it meant taking the GMAT and all of that stuff. And I was pretty terrified of standardized testing. So bit the bullet eventually after a couple of failed attempts and applied, got into INSEAD, which was a dream come true. So left that life in South America, went to INSEAD, and another fun twist here, had a baby in there, somewhere in there, right? So was still feeding him in the middle of like a very intense MBA period. So graduated in 2009, which was pretty much the worst time. I think right after COVID, I would say it would be one of the worst times to graduate from a very expensive program because there was a global recession,
Yeah.
financial crisis,
Yeah.
and as an Indian, needing a work permit to work anywhere with an Indian passport was honestly quite painful. But I worked through it, right? And got over all of that imposter syndrome, and that crap is real. Like it really is. And I got a few offers, and I actually could choose. So I was very lucky that way. Lucky and a little bit prepared. I would say both, right? That's what happens. And came to Belgium, worked in a telecom company for a couple of years. Great fun. They went through restructuring. I was let go. Then I was in a mining and chemical company. Great fun. Restructuring. I was let go. Then in a food company, which was fantastic as well, but it just started draining. I would say life. It started draining life out of me for all kinds of reasons. And I asked myself, is this it? So I left. I didn't have a job in hand, which is not a very smart thing to do. And I decided I don't know what I want to do, but I'll figure it out. And I started like creating videos on YouTube just for like thinking maybe there's somebody else like me who could use this help. One video, two video, and then nothing happened with that for a couple of years. But in the meantime, I also took that content and put it on LinkedIn. Then someone reached out and said, "Hey, do you do this? Can I take your help? I'm kind of stuck." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I do this." So, set up a company, etc.
Yep.
And the rest is history.
That's quite a journey. I mean, a lot of questions reverberating in my mind, but
Yeah,
Sanjeev
I
Chandani
skipped
was
some
actually
things.
in season 1 on my podcast. So, of course,
I'm sorry, say again?
Sanjeev Chandani, the founder of Naukri, was on my podcast season
Amazing.
1. And
Amazing.
GE Capital, a couple of my dear friends, their first job was with GE Cap. So, familiar name, of course. The flight to Uruguay, I'm sure you have a story there. How did you end up? I mean, there would be millions and millions of people in India who might not even know there's a country called Uruguay.
I mean, I just about knew it was a country because I'd studied in geography, but that was about it. And when you're in India, and if you go down and you start digging, you want to go as far from India as possible. That's where Chile is. So it really was like a 36-hour flight and whatnot. So what happened is I was with a guy, we were seeing each other, and eventually we ended up getting married. And his company took him to South America to set up marketing.
Got it.
And I followed him. But I, at that time, had to give up what was a very promising career at GE at the time. I had actually just completed their assessment centers, management training assessment center, and I had become a team leader. So, this is what you do when you're supporting your spouse, right? In this case, it happened to be him, and I supported him. However, when I got into the MBA program in France, he had to follow me because it was my turn, right? And then after the MBA, when I got this amazing opportunity at this telecom company, so we moved to France and then France to Belgium. Both
Okay.
the times he followed me because it was just, you got to do what,
Yeah.
you got to do to support each other in the marriage. So that's kind of how it happened.
Beautiful story. Title of the podcast, Courage Talks, is from my book, Against All Odds, where I narrate various instances of courage which my father displayed in his regular life. So it's a patented question. What does courage mean to you?
I take the literal meaning. Well, I love words and I love etymology where words come from. So literally courage, cœur in French, right? Literally means the heart. So for me, courage means leading from the heart, not from the
Beautiful.
head. Not
I
from the
never
head.
heard this one.
Even when everything is telling you don't do it, you're going to regret it, but your heart is saying go for it. For me, that's courage.
And that's what took you to Uruguay. That's
Yeah,
courage.
I would say every move, and that was a pretty difficult thing to do because it was comfortable where we were. This was
Yeah.
away from family, new language, new life, new no friends, nothing.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Who's your role model for courage?
I want to say people we don't hear a lot about, and for me, that would be the grandparents. The grandparents that I had, and a lot of us had when we were younger, they have been through stuff that we cannot imagine. Most of us are not coming from wealth, right? Generational wealth. Some of them have seen poverty, sharing limited resources with multiple siblings, right? Setting up shop or doing something because they had to do it. There was no choice. There was no victimhood. They just did what they had to do. I learned a lot from both sets of grandparents.
Why don't you take us back to childhood days? Any childhood memory? Where did you grow up? Any funny or quirky incident which you remember from childhood which remains with you?
Oh my gosh, nobody has asked me this, Hetal. Hopefully, I'm not going to start crying. Yeah, childhood was New Delhi, India, where I grew up. I have a twin sister and I have an older brother. Almost always had a dog, and life was simple, not complicated. It was easy, relatively speaking. What left a mark on me? I don't know. I just remember I was talking to my mom about this yesterday. I just remember being driven from like being ambitious from the beginning. And people used to say, and my parents used to say, I'm like, you can chill a little bit. And I was like, no, it's good. I want to get good grades and I want to do well. And I think the person who convinced me of this was actually my grandma, my mom's mom. She told me this in Hindi once. She said, whatever you do, बच्चे जो भी करो, independent. I was like, okay, yes, Nani. But she always considered that to be important, which I think was a little bit little bit ahead of her time, because at that generation it was completely normal to depend on the man of the house.
Yeah, yeah.
And she had humble beginnings. She was a school teacher, very sweet retirement, humble, kind, grounded. But her thing was always have your own resources. And that has stayed with me. I was telling my mom, and she was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah. I spent a lot of summers with her. Do you remember?" She said, "Yeah." So yeah, I'm thinking about it now, and I'm kind of sad that I wish, these things I had shared more with them when they were alive. Well, but better late than never.
Yeah. The point about being driven and being independent is probably where my next question is alluding to. A lot of people think multiple times and decide not to. The whole transition from a corporate life to being a solopreneur, sort of what you are. You did mention a bit about it in the introduction that it was more of circumstances that got you there. But given a choice, what kind of a thought process goes behind when you decide to be on your own rather than doing a job?
Yeah. In my case, none. It was not the plan. I was not one of those people, Hetal, that is corporate bashing and talks about being your own boss. I'm sorry, that is complete BS. Anyone who is self-employed will tell you instead of working 9 to 5, they're working 24/7. It is not necessarily the so-called more advantageous route, even though it looks like it on the outside. It takes years and years for automations, for systems. You have a team in place, and then you can sort of step back or whatever. But till then, you gotta hustle. And it's not always as glamorous as it seems. So I would have stayed in corporate if if those circumstances were different. I was one of those people that looked forward to Monday morning. I would prepare my clothes the night before. This is what I'm going to wear. This is the, little necklace I actually liked going to work, and I loved the routine, and I loved coming home and starting it all over again. It was good, because when you were at work, you were at work, and that's it. And then you're home, you do your thing, and at the end of the day, no matter how bad things got, it was always someone's problem, right? It's different when you're an employee. Here you're the freaking customer service, you're accounting, you're marketing, you're social media manager, you're everything. So it's not necessary. So for me, the thinking wasn't thought through, calculated, step by step. I plunged, and it's different for different people. I'm also coming, when I speak like this, I'm also coming from privilege, right? I had a little bit saved up. That's important. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't talk about this, and I've got people in my group coaching program who tried out entrepreneurship for a while, and they were like, "You know what, I'm done, and I don't want to look for a job, but I feel like things have changed. Can you help me?" And that just tells you that you need to have an appetite, and you need to be a little bit of a glutton for punishment, no matter what it looks like. And someone's like, "Oh my god, in 3 months he reached 100K in revenue monthly." I'm like, I don't believe it. I'm sorry. It takes time. It takes time, right? So it wasn't thought through. Short answer.
So if a job offer lands in your inbox tomorrow morning, are you going to grab it?
I would have to look really, really carefully and look at the final the finer terms and conditions and the fine print. It has to make a lot of sense. Probably I would not. But
That's
this is now after, I left corporate in 2018, right? So I've had quite some time to make mistakes and have some experience. But if it gives me some flexibility, and if I can still do what I'm doing, who knows? So far, nothing has happened. Nothing has come.
Yeah. As far as leading Supercharge Ventures, you have been involved in a lot of career transitions for a lot of people. Any interesting journey or anecdotes that you'd like to share, who you mentored and coached, who are
Yeah,
there, who are here now, and kind of?
so many, so many. I think for me, because the theme is courage.
Yeah,
For me, the my favorite stories are always the stories of courage, where it's like, because things gotta get really bad, Hetal, before they get good.
of
No one's
course.
coming from medium to want to get better. People when they reach out to me, 99% of the time, they're not in a good place,
Yeah.
right? So they're not reaching out to me when they're happy. So to go from there, where, for example, primary breadwinner in the family, and I got laid off, out of the blue it happened, to saying, to have the audacity to dream and be like, actually, you know what? For example, this client of mine in Abu Dhabi, he was like, oil and gas, it's been great, Sonal, but I'm done. And I don't want to continue my, it feels like a little bit of like I'm climbing up the wrong tree. And this is not the future. I want to get into renewables, but I have no experience in renewables. So who's going to hire me? And I was doing a case study. I did his case study a few weeks ago, and I asked him, and I said, "What made you decide?" He said, "Do you remember when we had the discovery call?" And this is before he signed up with me. And he had shared all of these dreams, and I listened to him, and he said, "What do you think?" When people are doing this, Hetal, they're not like looking at you and saying, "What do you think?" What they're really saying is, they're almost asking for permission, you know, like someone else said, I can do it. And I looked at him and he said, "Do you think it's possible?" And I was like, "Oh, 100%." And he did. He made it happen in like 4 or 5 months. But it was like, it sounds easy. There were so many times he didn't show up to the call because he was like, "What's the point? It's so scary. It's not going to work. My current company, it's 70 hours a week. We work Monday to Saturday. I don't have time to come to these group calls. You've given me a lot of homework. I don't have time for it." But the spark was there. And when the opportunity came and he was like, "I really want to work here," I said, "Okay, write to them. This is what you're going to say. And mean it, dude. Just mean it. Don't just say it." He's like, "Okay, fine." And they wrote back, and there was like a 2 hour phone call. 2 hour phone call resulted in further interviews. And I was like, dude, this is what happens when it's not putting yourself out there, because everybody says put yourself out there. It's when you believe, let's talk. But in your head, you're thinking, I want to talk to you. I think I can help you. But at the background, it's like, even if he says no, that's okay. Because I don't need him to validate me. I'm
Yeah.
pretty awesome the way I am. That is a journey, Hetal. When I witnessed my clients going through this, rejection still stings, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But it doesn't define. That is the most exciting thing for me.
Very interesting. The other aspect which obviously stands out in your profile is the cultural transition that you had. And, for me, it was just India to Japan and back. While, of course, it was a huge country called Japan, you transgressed like 5+ countries, multiple continents. And, culture comes in your face in different forms, whether it's in language or in food or whatever. Right? How did you navigate across, and any particular instance or example that you recollect? And
Yeah,
stay.
for sure. Because living in South America, learned Spanish from scratch and became fluent in a year, right? I couldn't have got the job in PwC if I wasn't speaking, even though I was making mistakes when I was speaking. That's okay. People didn't care about that. And the same, I didn't mention this, but when I got my job in Belgium, I had to learn French, became fluent very quickly. I didn't have a choice. I had to do it, right? I think that my favorite thing about working across cultures is that, I know this is going to sound a little bit cliche, but I really believe it to be true. We are far more alike than we are different. It doesn't matter if you're living in France or if you're living in Fatehpur Sikri. It doesn't matter if you're living in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, or if you're living in Madhya Pradesh. We are far more alike than we are different. I just wish people knew that more, because there would be less problems in the world. At the end of the day, people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to have a good life, they want to earn well, protect their family, take care of their family, go on 1 or 2 vacations a year, make fun of, when the mother-in-law visits. Those are universal things. Complain about the father-in-law. Those things happen across cultures. And all these friendships across, it's not just like living in Uruguay, making friends with Uruguayans, but like living in Chile, but also making friends with like a Swede, right? Or a Swiss person, or someone from Argentina. Because everybody, like, you get in these circles where there's lots of, I don't like to use the word expat because it sounds really elitist, but there are other fellow immigrants. And when you go into these melting pots, there's just a lot to love. That's what I'm going to say.
You focus a lot on career fulfillment, more like a birthright rather than a privilege. How has that driven you, and how is that? I mean, where did this whole thought process emerge? Did you have a eureka or a aha moment when you realized the importance of fulfillment?
I did. I did. It feels funny to talk about this because I'm usually the one in my podcast asking, was there that moment that supercharged? And here you are asking me, and I have to say it feels weird, but it's good. It's good. I still remember this was in the early days when I was sort of starting to help people, and it was very slow. It was, picking up very slowly. And I still remember January 2020, and I recorded this video. It's still there. It was 1st of Jan 2020. And I recorded this video saying Happy New Year. I just put it on LinkedIn and I felt silly, but I was like, doesn't matter, let's do it. And I said Happy New Year in 4 languages. I was very proud to do that. And then I said, what is the theme for this year? Obviously, this is before we were all touched by COVID. We didn't know, the dumpster fire that was going to come to us. And I was like, for me, the theme this year is going to be like actually just be a nice person, be kind. I said, that's going to be my theme for this year. And I want to make that happen. While I was recording that, I still remember I had applied because back in the day, you had to apply to get access to LinkedIn Live because I wanted to start like interacting with people and do live streams. I'd seen others do it and I was like, I want to do that. And this wasn't given to just anyone, it was in beta and it was given to very, very few people. So both the times that I had applied, Heathel, I got rejected. And I was like, doesn't matter. Third time I applied again, within less than a couple of weeks of recording that video, I got access. And I kid you not. So January 17th, 2020 till now, okay, we are sitting at, I don't know, 260 or 270 weeks. I have to do the math. I don't remember. I haven't missed a single Friday. And when you say what does it mean to you? This is a job for me. I take it very seriously. I am not doing this for popularity. Of course, at the end of the day, if someone discovers me and they want to work with me, that's great. It's a funnel. But nobody's forcing anyone like, hey, you watch my live stream. I think we should talk. Come work with me. I have a program. Let's sell. I don't do that. It's just not my vibe.
Yeah.
So this is all for free, right? And I sometimes, in the beginning, I used to bring in a lot of guests. Now I'm doing these solo episodes where it's just me hanging out on LinkedIn and YouTube. It doesn't matter what's happened. I have literally done this through like my leg breaking or had just finding out I got COVID or one of my kids fell or somebody's birthday, Christmas, New Year, it doesn't matter. It is a commitment for me. And I am always thinking one person somewhere out there who cannot afford to work with a career coach right now is desperate for help. And maybe they have a question. Maybe I have a perspective that can help. I'm always thinking about one person. And that is my thing. It's like if you can afford to work with a coach, it's great. If you have the access, it's great. Because at the end of the day, coaches are also human beings. We are taking care of our families, we're supporting our families, right? But it doesn't mean that you are not worthy of getting help. So, except for like one Friday, I think I missed it because I was literally in the ER.
Oh man.
I've been live, and I it's not just like seva, and not just in a sense of service, but it's joy for me. It's my favorite time of the week.
Yeah. I can totally relate to it. I mean, I do these podcasts with pure intent of discovering courage among people. There's no monetary angle here. Obviously, I feel nice that, an episode does well and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of connecting with people around the world and discovering stories is, I don't think there are any other ways you could actually do this at scale for a regular period of time. But the regularity that you achieved is amazing, right? I mean, gets me to the next question, which is regarding your podcast. I mean, how the whole story originated. What has it given you?
I started the podcast for super duper selfish reasons, and that is to learn about other people's careers. If others want to listen and come along for the ride, that's a cherry on the cake for me. I know you were going to ask something about because at the end of the day, you can't do everything. So when I started the podcast, it was literally one episode per week, and I didn't miss it because I am very consistent and I took that very seriously. But a couple of years ago, I slowed down a bit. because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do. And I'm a one-person show. I'm doing everything, right? So it's still there. Frequency is a lot less, but I've done it for like selfish reasons to learn from other people. And my favorite thing in the podcast is when people are like, when I'm so every guest is very carefully handpicked, and I'm not interested in millions of this person has millions of followers, so they're going to listen. In fact, in the early days when I did bring in people who had millions of followers, those episodes actually tanked. It's really interesting.
Because the other person really doesn't give a damn about the episode that
Not
he's.
just to give a damn, it's not that interesting a story.
Hmm.
But the stories that are most interesting are people who have hardly any social media presence.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to hear from those guys. Like, how did you get there? And I'm interested in, like, speaking of courage, right? Like, I'm interested in stories where they are talking about making decisions and taking action when they didn't know what was coming up in front of them. So, my favorite examples of guests are people who are refreshingly honest, and there are two people that come to mind. Sunil Gupta is this amazing guy. He's written two books. One is called Backable, and the second is called Everyday. He's in the US, so it's Everyday Dharma, but Dharam, right? I keep saying Dharam in the podcast. I kept saying Dharam because I said Dharma makes me want to barf. So he started a company called Rise that was later One Medical and then was bought by Amazon. So he did really well, but he had a huge amount of struggle. And he's the younger brother of a very well known media presence called Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's on CNN.
Makes sense.
So that episode, he had a lot to lose by being so vulnerable with me. He didn't care. And oh my gosh, the ending of that episode, like we were both tears. It's never happened before. And another guy who's not as well known, right? Kevin Monroe. He talked about how he I talked about like courage, and he talked about how he was, trying to start a gratitude movement, and he wanted to do this big launch. An agency found him. They said, we'll spread the message. He ended up getting scammed thousands of dollars. He shared all of that stuff. I like hearing stories where people are ready to share, not, oh, this is behind me and I'm so successful now. Look at me now. I'm interested in people who get into the ugly now. And like, what are you doing about it now? Because that is rare in this world. So
Yeah.
that's what I live for.
Very interesting. No, I think picking out these people who are not much talked about, yet they have so much to talk about, can be quite gratifying. I think because and you can see that in their eyes, right? You can see the genuineness in the story that they're sharing. Brings me to the next question is with regard to imposter syndrome, right? I mean, were you always this confident, or it took a lot of time to reach where
Long
you have?
time.
And
Long
what's been
time.
this journey like? And what were those petrified moments like? Take us behind
Petrified
it.
moments were like first day getting into the MBA program in SIAD, and first day in their Fontainebleau campus. I went in, I was shaking, I didn't know what I was doing. That was the first time I also left my newborn, so there were probably some hormones in there as well. The entire duration of the program, I felt like I didn't belong. And it was like not like a small little feeling, it was the whole 1 year inside the program. At the end of the day, I can't blame someone. I did have some difficult experiences with a couple of people, but at the end of the day, I was the one who made me feel that way. I was the one. I had given myself this power of thinking I wasn't enough. And I graduated, I told you, in 2009. It took me 13 years to get over that. 13 years. The first time I went back on campus was 2022. And that was also for some alumni volunteer event. And I was so emotional. I was so emotional at that time. I still remembered everywhere, every place I sat where I felt like I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. So when people talk about like feeling like a fish out of water or feeling like they're not enough, on one hand, I have a lot of empathy for them because I know what they're going through. On the other hand, I also want to shake them up and say, don't be like me. Don't take 13 years to figure this out. Figure this out now. You are exactly what is needed right now, exactly the way you are, and you don't have to change anything about yourself. I wish someone had told me back then. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so regular with like these Supercharge Fridays and going live is I missed having that friend near or far sharing that with me, and it was an incredibly lonely experience. And I don't want anyone else to go through this. So maybe subconsciously, I want to be that person for someone who is going through this.
That's interesting. And a lot of times people reach out to you when they're stuck in their career and you realize that they're stuck for specific reasons, which is very difficult to bring up and tell them on their face. And you need to tell them to hang in there, knowing the fact that they're not enjoying. How do you go across that path?
It's not overnight, right? If there's lots of people who reach out for sure, like there's DMs, etc., you can't help everyone, right? Which is why I do the live streams. But inside, in my client, like I have a 6-month group coaching program which is focused on job search. It's a journey, Hetal. Not everyone is showing up bright. Not everyone is getting amazing results. Some people get amazing results in 2 months. For some people, it takes 9 months. Can't help it, right? Markets are different. Pivots happen. People give up. We often give up on ourselves. We're like, what's the point? So I do, a little bit of like making sure people stay accountable because they have goals, they have dreams to make that happen. So I do a little bit of chasing to make sure that they're honoring that. They're honoring those dreams for themselves. But at the end of the day, you also have to remind them. I remind them a lot. Like I tell them to go back and look at their LinkedIn recommendations when it's particularly a low day, when it's not going well. Read your LinkedIn recommendations. Remember, because I make them do a lot of homework, including like their achievements and their accomplishments. I'm like, stay there for a minute, right? You made a lot of stuff happen. Don't forget about it. And it's also very important to remind people that we're going to be working most likely till our late 60s, early 70s. We have different access to healthcare compared to our grandparents, most of whom, if they worked, they retired at 58. My grandpa did. And I was like, 58 is young. So if you think about it, 40 to 45-year career, and you're going through a little bit of trouble for 3 or 6 months, it's nothing. It's a blip. It's a blip. And it's very important. I zoom that out regularly for people and remind them, because it's so important to not focus on the problem, but focus instead of creative solutions on how we can make that happen. Because when people get into that zone, like, oh, suddenly, I don't know what happened. Suddenly, like these opportunities started coming to me. A little bit of luck, isn't it? I'm like, oh, it's not. It's not. You started thinking about this differently. And it shows how you show up in interviews. It shows when when you write a comment on LinkedIn, you're not coming across as thirsty or bitter or angry, but you're coming across like, hey, maybe I can help. Should we talk? Easy, light, free.
A lot of times, courage is not displaying emotions when you're highly emotional. Any particular incident which comes to mind in your career where you have to really work hard to stop from tears flowing down?
First of all, I mean, what you just said right now, I don't know if that's a question or a statement because it sounds like an opinion right now. Courage often means not displaying emotion, right? So it's an opinion.
Yeah, it's not brought up as frequently as it should. Right? People invariably cite courage from a physical strength perspective. It doesn't talk about emotional strength as well, right? So it requires courage to not display
It's super
emotion.
interesting here. Let me stay here for a second. It's super interesting because when you said emotions, don't let emotions show, and the first emotion that came to your mind was sadness, right? Tears. We don't often talk about courage where you see bosses, often male bosses who are thumping their fist and yelling on the top of their lungs in anger, because that's emotion too.
Of course.
But we don't
So
often talk about that, right? Like it's like considered like this kind of bravado.
just curious, did a boss do that to you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's considered bravado,
Did
right?
you
It's
react?
considered bravado and courageous, actually. I will even say this. It's considered courageous when they're like yelling and screaming on the top of their lungs, versus emotions are like not courageous. So it's quite like we're like cherry picking when it comes to emotion. Anyway, I just wanted to
Yeah.
nudge
Yes.
there for a second. I don't necessarily agree that emotions don't belong in the workplace because then it's like pure robotic AI and the human element is stripped completely. And what makes us human is the imperfection. It's the imperfection. So Did I have to ever fight to hold back? I done things I regret? Yeah. Who hasn't? Stupid things. So yes, particularly in my early 20s. Giving too much feedback sometimes. TMI. I had a TMI problem. Too much information. I was told I over communicate. And we were told on sharing feedback on how you can make, what can someone do to be better. I went a little too enthusiastically on that. There was like a long laundry list on what this person could do better. If I had been on the receiving end, it would, now I realize it sounded like such an attack. I was coming from a good place, but no, that was not the way to do it. So a little bit of balance can help. For me, it's not, I think the way I'm talking about this now, so many years later, for me, the courage also means accepting the imperfections. It's part of it, and it's made me who I am today. But the fact that I can openly talk about it today, that's courage as well, right? I don't wanna, like, there's so many people who will like bury this stuff that doesn't make them look good. I wrote this in my newsletter a few weeks ago. I wrote, cringe is cool. When I look at my first episodes, first videos on YouTube, September 2018, Jan 2019, so raw, terrible audio, terrible video. Where am I looking? I'm blinking so much. What's wrong with me? It's so cringe. That's what my kids say. Mama, that's so cringe. And I'm like, they're like, people, don't you want to delete that? You're so much better now. You're so much more confident. I'm like, no, the cringe factor is cool. It shows the journey
Yeah, that's true.
to becoming.
That's true. You, of course, you don't choose your clients, right? So you would have a young 20 something who's lost in terms of where he wants to go. And you would have a 40, 50 something, a seasoned, successful CEO who's also lost. How do you tackle the senior
Okay.
candidate?
So, firstly, I do choose my clients. Before working together, we get on a discovery call. And if it's not a good fit, I say it upfront to them because I think life's too short to waste time, right? And it's a sizable amount of time and energy and financial investment. And if it's not going to be a fit, I think it's like stealing when you know it's not a fit and you still go ahead. So
Yeah,
I don't, that's the first thing. The second thing is I don't tend to work a lot, Hetal, with people in their 20s. It's my target, my perfect like unicorn client is typically between 35 and 58. And they have had 10 or 15 years minimum of some sort of success to get to the point and have it is privilege at the end of the day to say, hey, I'm feeling a bit lost. Because most people don't have that. They're like, I'm too busy working and supporting my family. What audacity to say that you're lost. Who's got the luxury to say that? When you have worked hard and you're like, I don't know if I want to continue to do this. Or I'm feeling lost. I've never been laid off before. That's a luxury. In this world, so many people are laid off and there's a stigma. We don't talk about it. I've been laid off 3 times. And it's one of my first videos that went viral on LinkedIn in 2019 when I talked about being laid off. Because it's just part of it, right? It's part of capitalism. So the question is, how do you deal with different, there's people in the program with varying, ages and backgrounds and industries and functions. The one thing they all have in common, they are all ambitious to make their career and life better. And we focus on that.
Yeah, it makes sense to be able to, I won't say you would be able to, but it makes sense to try and choose your clients rather than
It's easy for me to say that. It's not easy, right? At the end of the day, you're like, but this is a great fit. And honestly, I could use, the additional sales. I could use the additional income. It'll be good. It's helpful when you're self-employed, you're taking care of everything. So to say no, it's not like done on a whim. But I've heard this from my own coach telling me, she said, there's nothing worse than letting the wrong person pay you. The energy suck, the life suck that happens from getting the wrong clients,
oh, yeah.
that is a different level of pain I do not want to experience again.
Yeah. Regardless of how much you want to help someone, the last thing you want to do is in process of helping someone, you yourself go down.
Yeah, because you gotta keep showing up. You gotta be at your best.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how you're feeling. But if there's someone who's just bringing everybody else, bringing themselves down, bringing the coach down, and bringing the entire vibe, they're bringing everyone down. That has got to go. But that's on me for having allowed that to begin with, because people display that during the discovery call. And it's rare. I'm making it sound like it's very common. It's not. It's rare when I say it's not going to be a good fit.
You have a fairly large YouTube followership. You got a silver play button. I'm sure anyone can go on and on say how advantageous is to have a large followership. Any negatives, any shortcomings, or anything?
Uh, Very good. I don't think, maybe because I'm speaking with someone from India, I don't think it's a very large followership. There's people with millions and millions. Is there anything bad about it? No. It's a
Does
joy.
that make you extra cautious in terms of what you're putting up? You become
It's personal
usually
preference. It's personal preference. I've never been someone who's shared a lot on from my private life. So I've never had my kids' pictures up there. My husband is very accomplished, very successful, a LinkedIn top voice in his own right. I've never talked about him on LinkedIn. I never will. He's in his own career, he's in his own life. So unless one day he decides to quit all that and work for me, which I think is going to be difficult because he's expensive, I can't afford him. We're living our parallel lives. So that's a personal preference I have. For many people, it's okay to put all of this out there. So I continue to be mindful of that. That hasn't changed and that will never change. But I'm more mindful of that as more and more people discover me.
some rapid fire questions. One instance of courage of your spouse that you can recollect.
Getting married to me. I'm kidding. Courage from my spouse.
I'm sure I can see him laughing when when he hears that.
I think this took courage when we're both the same age. So when we were both 28, going to be 29, which is quite young, right? I'm sharing something personal with you. I
Yeah.
started feeling a bit, it's almost animal instinct of maternal, like, is it time? Is it time to have a baby? And I grappled with it for a little while. And he said, why are you making such a big deal out of it? And I said, I don't know, because should we do it or should I do my MBA? Because the MBA in INSEAD is very expensive and it's very intense.
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know when, but I remember him saying these exact words. He said, don't worry about it. Let's do both. We'll figure it out. And it was like, not like I needed his permission, but at the end of the day, it's a team effort, right? Your first baby it's a project. It's the first project you do as a couple. I think that took courage because it wasn't easy for him either.
I think do now, think later is an interesting strategy, which many times work for some of the toughest things. And I always believe that you can't think yourself out of a problem. Right? Some people think, let me think. No, I don't want to let you think because it's not going to help you think better. I mean, it's not going to help you.
There's people who get on like a potential discovery call with me, and this is an example of what I was saying earlier. They'll like, let me think about it. I'm like, tell me what's there to think about. Like, we've been through all your questions. And I'm like, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, they're like, oh, I made up my decision. I said, you know what? I wish you the best because you need to be more bold in your career. This isn't, the pros and cons. Sometimes you just got to go out there and do it, man.
Yeah. And sometimes we are so biased about our thoughts, we will anyway transgress towards what works for us rather than what does
You
not
will
work.
always transgress towards what feels safe and comfortable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's always true. Inspiring book which stays with you.
Lots. Always reading something. Inspiring book that stays with me. There is a particular book that I've liked so much that I've got the hard copy as well as the Audible because it's not enough. And sometimes, when you're lucky, you have the author's voice, which
Yeah.
is so amazing. And this is an author who's passed away. His name is Dr. Wayne Dyer. And it's called The Power of Intention. So I have the book on my side table, but it's also on Spotify. And so simple, The Power of Intention, but it continues to stay with me.
Your most recommended book?
Sorry, isn't that what you asked?
I'm just asking the same question in a different way.
The book that I actually told you in the green room just before we pressed record is the book that I tell every single client of mine who has a senior leadership position. And I'm just going to open up my phone for a second because I don't want to get the name wrong.
Sure.
And it's by someone called Ruchira Chaudhary.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very lucky to have her on my podcast. It's called Coaching: The Secret Code to Uncommon Leadership. And every single person that has received this recommendation from me has gone ahead and found it very useful for leading people, whether it's one person, 100 people.
That sounds interesting. A movie that's inspired you?
I don't do well with these rapid fire because I'm a bit of an overthinker. There's so many from childhood and adulthood, but since I have to pick one, I'm gonna pick the one which is at the cusp of childhood and adulthood, right? Which is like leaving school, college, turned 21, and just before I went out in the world. And this was the movie that came out at that time. I think it was around the year 2000. It's called Lagan. Lagan.
Right.
Not only the story, the characters and the music, which was amazing, but also the audacity. Like he went ahead and Amir Khan went ahead and got a nomination for the Oscars, which I think it should have won, not Chocolat. No, not Chocolat, Amelie. I don't remember which one, but I love. Who doesn't love a good movie with about
Of
Dark
course.
Horse, the Dark Horse.
Any slogan, any quote that you oft repeat that you think stays with you all the time?
These days, there is one. I would often have others, but they're not coming to mind right now. These days, I'm on a bit of a strength and health and nutrition journey, and I think it's called Hard Choices Today, Easier Life Tomorrow. Easy choices today, hard life tomorrow. I'm particularly reminding myself of that when I feel like doing the easy thing in the heat of the moment.
That's been wonderful, Sonal, and great getting insights into your background, in your career, fabulous journey that you've had, the kind of inspiration you've been for a lot of people, the kind of changes that you've impacted in lives of people who have been in touch with you. Carry on the wonderful journey, and I hope we'll bump into each other at some point of time again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye bye.